Okay, it's currently 9:40. We're going to get started here. Miss J is going to be presenting to you today. I'm just going to quickly go through some basics for the fourth quarter so everybody's on the same page here. And then I'll turn it over to her for the actual content today. If you haven't noticed already, the weekly assignment this week was assigned over the weekend and it is due on Friday. We're going to be doing that all throughout the fourth quarter because we are transitioning now to Monday, a more in-person A-B schedule. So it's more conducive for us to assign something either on a Sunday night or a Monday and have it due on a Friday moving forward. So I know that that's another shift. I know not everybody deals well with that kind of change, but it's actually beneficial to us because we assign it. You get a chance to look over some materials during the week. And then Miss J, Mr. Ficker, or myself will use the Zoom meetings on Wednesday to make sure everybody's on the same page with the material. So it gives you a couple of days to look over things. And even if you haven't taken the diagnostic quizzes for this week yet, you still have a basic understanding, hopefully, of kind of where we're headed. So from now on, I just want to make sure we're clear. You have 3 weeks before spring break here. We're in week one. So this is air review, week one. You have diagnostic quizzes to take. You have a survey to do after you take those quizzes. And I've tried to make it as simple as humanly possible to give us feedback on what you're still confused about, what you're still having issues with. So as you're taking those quizzes, if you hit something and you're like, limited government, what the heck is that? You will notice on the survey, instead of asking you to like type out anything, I have given you check boxes. You can look at it and say, oh, here's one I didn't understand. So it's a very quick and easy way to assess what you still need before you take the air test coming up after spring break. And your testing date is, Mr. Ficker, do you remember, is it the 15th? Am I correct on that? April 15th?
Yes.
Okay. So April 15th is the day that you will actually take the air test. Okay. So we're going to use the 3 weeks before spring break to get you prepped for that. So that when you do come back from spring break, it's not such a massive, shock to your system, at least with the content. So that's kind of why we're doing it the way we're doing it here. Now we're in week one. Obviously, the next 2 weeks will have air tests associated. The diagnostic quizzes will be associated. And you also have an assignment on top of it. Every one of those weeks is going to have 100 points available. So by spring break, you'll have your first 300 points of the first quarter, and 50 points each week are going to be the diagnostic tests and filling out the questionnaire. Literally, by taking those quizzes and filling out the questionnaire, you will get 50 out of 50. Okay. But do not wait around. Do not think that we're going to take that as late work, because once we take the air test, those are done. So don't think that Ficker and I are going to leave them up like we normally have done, leaving it open until the end of a quarter. Once you are past the air test, there's no reason for us to keep those diagnostic quizzes up and running. We're going to take them down. So you really should, especially for those of you that struggled third quarter and maybe didn't pass. There are a few of you on this call that I know did not pass third quarter. If you need fourth quarter to make up for that, well, guess what? Fourth quarter needs to be like right now. You start by taking those diagnostics. You do what you need to do. You get your participation grade in. You do the extra assignment this week. It's over reparations and the current debate about reparations, which are payments to African Americans, descendants of former slaves, by the American government, and more importantly, a tacit admission of the United States government that we made a mistake with the institution of slavery. There are resources available to you. If you need more resources, you can reach out to me and I will provide them to you in order to do the assignment. But bottom line is, those 2 assignments are your assignments this week. And this will be the way it is all the way up to spring break. When we get back from spring break, we're going through a financial literacy unit. And that'll take about 3, maybe 4 weeks to get through because of the testing window also kind of affecting whether or not we're going to see you. But bottom line is, you're going to have a financial literacy unit, which we take very serious because we're helping you guys to understand loans, helping you to understand taxes, insurance, so that when you get out into the real world and you start paying real bills, and some of you are saying, well, I pay a bill, I pay my cell phone. Well, add in rent, add in, food payments, add in insurance payments. We're going to teach you a family budget basically over the course of about 4 weeks after spring break. And then you finish off the year with a major project that we do every year. And usually the students actually kind of enjoy doing it because it's kind of a summation of the entire year and looking into political views and how they can be applied to you personally. It's called the Personal Political Platform Project. We will start that, and that'll be the end of the year and take the place of a final exam, so long as you guys attend the proper amount of Zooms, have the right percentage on your exam, and and you do the work that is necessary for your air tests. More on that later when we get the plan from the administration. I've taken enough time doing the nuts and bolts. Bottom line is, if you have any questions on how the grades are looking or how the assignments are looking for the fourth quarter, please reach out to me. You can use the chat function. You can write me an email, or you can stay after when Miss J is done with her activity today. But bottom line is, the fourth quarter is very important for many of you on this call. Some of you didn't pass third quarter and you need fourth quarter to get credit for the year. Some of you were kind of borderline third quarter and you can't afford to stumble and fall down fourth quarter. But again, if you have any questions, concerns for any of that, please reach out and we'll talk. Miss J, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Hey guys, I hope you're having a good morning. Today we are going to play a Kahoot and then go over the information that we learned from it. And I have a guided notes for you guys to fill out. So if you want to fill it out as we're going through, as I'm giving you the presentation, go right ahead. You'll be done for the day. If not, the presentation is on Google Classroom. You can fill it out right after class. But it's really important that you guys actually have a hard copy of all the terms and everything that we learned today in regards to civil rights in government. It's going to be important for your air test. It's just important for you guys to know as citizens. But yeah, I don't want to take up any more time. We'll get started on the game. Let me pull up my screen. So as usual, you guys go to kahoot.it, and then you are going to type in the game pin. Does anyone need me to send the link to get to kahoot.com in the chat? Because I will do that. Awesome, we've got some people coming in. Awesome, I think we just have one or two more to join and then we'll get started. Is everybody in? Does anyone need another minute? Awesome. Okay, let's get started then. So we're reviewing the civil rights that you guys are going to see on your air test. So the first question is, what freedoms are granted to us by the Constitution? Is that civil rights or is that civil liberties? Okay, so this is actually civil liberties. So those are what are given to us by the Constitution. they're things to protect us from too much government oversight. So the next question is, what are legal rights that are put in place to protect us from discrimination? Is that civil rights or civil liberties? There we go. So that's civil rights. So those are things that are in place to protect us from discrimination. Those are things such as we'll learn about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, or making sure that we don't discriminate for marriage off of the basis of gender, things like that, to make sure that you are not discriminated against from different actions from the government. Great job, Jalen. Which amendment ensures that someone cannot be denied the right to vote based on? Got the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment as options. Okay, so that would be the 15th Amendment. That is the amendment that extended voting rights to all of the former slaves after the Civil War. Which amendment granted citizenship to all freed slaves after the Civil War? Is it the 12th Amendment, 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, or 15th Amendment? Okay, so 2 of you got it. That would be the 14th Amendment. Man, great job, Faith. You are on fire. Awesome. Which amendment abolished the United States? 12th Amendment, 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, or 15th Amendment? th Amendment. Great. All of you guys got that. That was awesome. Okay, which amendment contains the due process clause? You guys are going to hear about this a lot. Is it the 4th Amendment, 11th Amendment, 14th Amendment, or 17th Amendment? Awesome. So this is the 14th Amendment. So if you remember, this is what outlines citizenship in the United States. So it says a person's life, liberty, and property cannot be taken away without due process of the law. So you have to apply the law to all situations before you can take away a citizen's right. Look at you go, Colby. Nice job. Faith still in first. Awesome. Okay, which amendment ended poll tax? 22nd Amendment, 23rd Amendment, 24th Amendment, or 25th Amendment? Great, awesome job, guys. 24th Amendment. Okay. What was granted under the Civil Rights Act of 1965? There's 2 possible answers on this one. So if you click either of them, you'll be correct. But did it ban employment discrimination, ended voting discrimination, ended segregation in schools, or ended segregation in public places? Great, so the 2 possible answers were banned employment discrimination and ended segregation in public places. So this is what was put in place to make sure that places such as parks or restaurants could not deny somebody entrance based on their race. And then it also said you can't not hire somebody because of their race. Okay, Colby and Faith battling out for first, Adriana close behind. Second to last question. What did the Voting Rights Act of 1965 do? Did this grant women the right to vote, allow the federal government to intervene in state and local elections, ensured African Americans the right to vote through the 15th Amendment, or granted 18-year-olds the right to vote. So again, there's two possible answers for this one as well. Awesome. So yes, it allowed the federal government to intervene in state and local elections. So they were able to have a little bit more oversight, make sure there's no more voting discrimination. So it really extends upon what the 15th Amendment stated, which is why the other answer was ensured African Americans the right to vote granted through the 15th Amendment. It is making sure that the 15th Amendment is being applied to all elections, not just federal ones, but state and local ones as well. All right, so we are on to our last question. Which Supreme Court case ended segregation in schools? Was it Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education, Macaulay versus Maryland, or Marbury versus Madison? Great, you guys all got that one. So that was Brown versus Board of Education. So that is what finally ended segregation in schools, when the Supreme Court said separate but equal is not constitutional. You cannot have an all-white school and then a school only for Black children. It has to be by district, it has to be by where you live. It cannot be segregated based on race. So that is what started a lot of the integration of schools across the United States. So I have a presentation for us to go over that just has everything that we went over in the air test, but a little bit more in detail. So while I'm going through this again, on Classroom, if you look under Zoom class for today, there's an air test review guided notes. So like I said, you can fill those out right now. You can split your screen. But again, the presentation is posted. So if you want to just listen and then go right back after class, you can fill out the guide notes. You'll turn it in for 20 points. But like I said, it's just going to be completion. It's so you guys have this information that you can review for the air test. This is what the guided notes look like. You'll fill it out. It'll go over everything we talk about in the last 15 minutes. Does anyone have any questions about filling out the notes or anything like that? Great. So I will get started on the presentation. So like I said, this week we are going over civil rights in the government, and this is a big portion of your air test. There's going to be some questions on it, but it's also really important to know, because as you're learning about the history of it in our government, you also got to see how we are applying it to current events. So in order to understand a lot about what is being talked about with race relations and civil rights currently in the United States, you need to see how they have progressed throughout time in ways that we have, or the government has worked to extend equal rights to marginalized and other minority groups. But that being said, it's still important to know, because if you think that we are lacking in some areas still in society, it's important to know what we have put in place and what you all think could still be done today in order to make sure that equality and equity is still gained in our society. So starting off, we had the two terms that we looked at on the beginning of the Kahoot, which was civil rights versus civil liberties. So civil liberties, these are the freedoms granted to citizens through the United States Constitution. So it's things the government cannot do or cannot take away from a person. So if you think about it, this would be things like our First Amendment freedom of speech or freedom of religion, our Second Amendment right to bear arms. It's things we can do, things we have power over that the government can't take away from us. It protects us from tyranny or too much control of the government overtaking our lives. So that's what a civil liberty is. Now, the other thing we hear a lot about are a person's civil rights. So these are legal rights that an individual has, and this protects them from discrimination. And so these are things that the government must do or must put in place to ensure that everyone has equality. So this is things like making sure that there is not workplace discrimination. You can't discriminate in someone on the workplace because they are a woman or because of their race or things like that. That would be workplace discrimination. Or you can't discriminate based on a couple's right to marry because they are of the same gender. things like that. Those are legal rights put in place that the government does to protect a person. So remember, civil liberties, things a person has that the government cannot take away. Civil rights are things the government does and puts in place to make sure that everyone has equality. Does that make sense between the two different terms for everybody, between civil rights and civil liberties? Okay. So moving on then. So we looked at civil rights amendments. So in order to think about it this way, because I saw that there was a couple little points of confusion with this between the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Those are what are considered the Civil War amendments. They all came during the Reconstruction era between the years 1865 and 1870. And so if you think about it, it starts with the 13th Amendment. They had to get rid of slavery. Before you can grant citizenship or a person the right to vote, you got to get rid of slavery. So the 13th Amendment comes around, it abolishes slavery and says we won't have this in the United States anymore. So now you have all of these free people. What do you do with them? You grant them citizenship. So the 14th Amendment states that those born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. So that is how all of those former slaves were able to become citizens in the United States. So first you get rid of slavery, and then you grant all of those people their citizenships. And then you grant them their voting rights in the 15th Amendment. And so this is stating that a person's right to vote cannot be taken away based on a person's race. So that's how those three work together. Let's go back to the 14th Amendment though, because you guys are going to hear some terms that go along with that. This is saying you cannot take, this is where you get the due process clause. And this says you cannot take away a person's life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. So this is where the government cannot come in and they cannot say, okay, we're going to take away your home, we're going to put you in jail, we're going to take away your life without going through our formal judicial process. There are multiple court cases that you get to see the due process of the law coming into play, such as Miranda versus Arizona. They did not know their legal rights while going through the judicial process. So they were saying they were not guaranteed due process of the law. That needs to be applied every single time in order to take away someone's life, liberty, or property. The other thing that comes out of the 14th Amendment that we see a lot is equal protection of the law. So this is saying that no matter who you are, what's like your gender, your race, your national origin, if you are a citizen, you have to have equal protection of the law. It cannot be discriminated against. So that comes in a lot of different court cases as well. And then the last civil rights amendment that we have is the 24th Amendment. So this is what outlawed poll taxes in national elections. And so this only applies to national elections. Remember, there's state and there's local elections. You vote for there's some places that vote for your mayor, you vote for your governor. Those are done just by the state. But national elections are when we vote for the president. And this is what outlawed poll taxes in those national elections for president. Poll taxes were put in place in order to discriminate against African American and Black citizens voting in the South. So what they said is you have to be able to pay a fee in order to vote. Well, a lot of these citizens did not have the money to be able to pay for that fee. Well, you're thinking, okay, well, this could be applied to poor white citizens as well. Well, yes, except for then they had a second issue in with this, which was called the grandfather clause. So they were saying, okay, so you can't pay to be able to vote in this election. If you can prove your grandfather voted, then we will allow you to vote in the election as well. Well, who would not be able to prove that their grandfather voted in elections, or whose grandfathers would not have been voting in elections? Those people, those African American and Black citizens whose ancestors were slaves, of course they would not have been voting. So they would not have had that proof, which means they would have had to pay that poll tax. And like I said, if they were not able to pay that poll tax, they would not have been able to vote in those national elections. And so that was obviously a violation of civil rights. That was not equal protection of the law. So the 24th Amendment came around and said, you cannot have poll taxes in national elections. Well, what about those local elections? And we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's where some of these civil rights acts come into play. The first one being the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So this is what outlawed segregation in public places. And so they said, you know what, we can no longer have segregated parks, courthouse, restaurants, theaters, hotels. Think about it. You see the signs from, during the 60s where it's whites only bathroom or blacks only bathroom. So that's how that was segregated. And this act said you cannot do that anymore. You cannot have segregated bathrooms, restaurants, whatever it may be. Everyone has to have equal access to all of those public places. And so that is the act that established that. The next act was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So this came 1 year after the 24th Amendment. The 24th Amendment got passed or ratified in 1964. In 1965, they realized that there was still this discrimination happening in those local and state elections. And so this act ensured equality in state and local elections. So they said that you cannot use poll taxes anymore in those state and local elections. You cannot use literacy tests anymore. You cannot make sure a person can read or write in order to discriminate against certain groups of people. It also allowed the federal government to get involved and have oversight in elections of areas with more than 50% of a non-white population. So if an area has more than 50% of a minority population, the federal government gets to oversee it and make sure that the way that they are handling the election is not discriminatory. And so this was a huge act because it allowed the federal government to get involved with things that had been priorly just state and local government. But it was something that they saw necessary in order to ensure equality for everyone in those elections. So this increased Black citizens' ability to participate in state and local elections. And then the last Civil Rights Act that we saw was the Fair Housing Act of 1968. So this prohibited discrimination in regards to the sale, purchase, or rental of homes based on a person's race, religion, national origin, or sex. So this was saying you can't deny a person the right to rent a home or buy a home in a certain area based on who they were as a person. You have to allow equality for everyone throughout all that. And then the last bit of civil rights that we cover are different court cases. So this is where you saw Brown versus Board of Education. So this was the court case that ended segregation in schools. And since this court case happened in the Supreme Court, which we learned prior in our judicial branch, as the Supreme Court being the highest court in the land, all states had to follow this ruling. So all states had to desegregate their schools. They could no longer have, white-only schools or Black-only schools. They had to be desegregated, meaning you attended the school from the district in which you lived. But this case is what made sure that all states had to follow this. It ruled segregation in public schools violated equal protection in the 14th Amendment. So that's where we see the 14th Amendment coming into play again, that equal protection under the law. Everyone has the same right to the public education based on your race. You should be equally protected. And then this case is what overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. So if you remember, Plessy versus Ferguson was the case that happened in the 50s that said separate but equal was constitutional. This court case said that is not the case. Separate but equal is not constitutional. That cannot be the case any longer. No more separation due to a person's race. Does anyone have any questions about any of the amendments, the acts, or the court cases that we covered? Awesome. Well, that was all that I wanted to cover with you guys today. Make sure that you were filling out those guided notes though, so you have that information for you to be able to review, and then make sure you were turning them in on Classroom as well. I don't know if Mr. Ficker or Mr. V has anything else for you to add for the end. But if you have any questions about anything that we covered, you can always reach out. We'll be more than happy to answer any of those questions.
Yeah, and just I'm going to reiterate the fact that you have the test coming up next month. It's after spring break, of course, but we are going to be reviewing for the 3 weeks prior to spring break. All of those tests will remain open. You can take them as many times as you would like. So if you take it the first time and it's not all that great and you want to go back and kind of see where you went wrong, you can certainly do that. There's no limit on how many times you can open them up. Again, it's a good review from what we've gone over so far. The diagnostic quizzes, and at least in my section, the only person that has done this already is Adams. So good job, Faith. You're already off to a good start in the fourth quarter here. But the rest of you, if you log on, it's going to be over the Constitution, the amendments, and the branches of government. So the stuff we went over basically in the first quarter. So it's been a while since we've gone over it, and Ms. J did a good job of differentiating between civil liberties and civil rights. But a lot of the stuff from the very beginning of the year, you might be a little rusty on. So it's a good idea to go back and take those quizzes, not just once, but maybe multiple times to get yourself kind of up to date and up to speed, because those are released test questions. It gets you back into the mindset of what an air test looks like. I know it's not exactly the greatest thing in the world to do and think about is, taking air tests right now, but it's been a while since you've taken one, because your ones last year were eliminated, and that was your big year. Your sophomore year is the one that you take the most. So it's been a while since you've seen one. It's a good idea to go through and kind of brush up a little bit, get used to it again, and see the kind of language they're using, the kind of verbs they're using, just so you get used to that, reading through those style of questions before you take the test coming up. So again, your assignments this week, to make sure we're all clear, and these are due on Friday, is you are taking the first round of diagnostic tests, of which there are 3 quizzes. They're short. Mr. Ficker has divvied them up to being at least manageable. I think Faith would be in agreement that it doesn't take too long to get through these quizzes. They're all multiple choice. There's no short answer or anything. So, some of them are check boxes or drop downs or things like that, but they are not written out test questions. So it doesn't take you long to go through and take these quizzes. When you're done, you do the survey that kind of tells me what your test scores were. So remember what your scores are. The directions tell you to write them down to make sure that you have them. So when you go out and fill out the questionnaire, you have them at the ready. But then also checking off kind of the areas of concern, the areas that you're just not getting or you need a little bit of help with, so that we can cater the air test review to you and try and answer those questions. So please make sure you do that. And then, of course, there is a civil rights assignment as well, which is watching videos and doing some journals. And the videos are not long, so you should be able to complete these 2 assignments fairly quickly. And a reminder that Ms. J just told you, you have guided notes from today. It's a quick 20-point assignment. If you were paying attention, you should do just fine filling that out and turning it in. So you have 120 points this week to start off the fourth quarter. All right, Mr. Ficker, anything to add?
Just if you get stuck on something on those tests, on those questions, because like Mr. V said, those are the release questions. So your questions on your air test will be very similar to that. I know your teachers have told you this in the past, but if you get caught on something, if something doesn't make sense, and you can't find any information online that'll help you with it, just send us an email, let us know, come into our office hours. If you see us, if you're going to be in person starting next week, you can ask us those questions in person. But yeah, don't just say, I'm not going to know that and move on to the next question. Try to figure it out, and we're here to help you.
All right, folks, we're at the end of our time today. Thank you for swinging by. Stay safe, stay healthy. And for some of you, we will see you next week.
Have a good rest of your day.
Colby, thanks for coming in early again.
And for rocking out the Kahoot. Well done.
Yeah, really good job, Colby.
Thank you.
You know what the prize is?
Bragging rights.
Well, there's more than that. Miss
He's
J's
smarter
gonna
than
get
you gave him credit
$100.
for there.
Huh? What is it?
What did you say I'm gonna give?
I said Miss J's gonna give you $100.
That sounds great to me.
I'm sure. it
Maybe
does.
lying there.
All right, I see you, Mr. Gregor.